Imagine if you suddenly disappeared from sight. After he awoke as a ghost, that is what happened to him. He now needs to figure out what happened to him and try to talk to other people. We begin with a group of people sitting around a dinner table outside of a house. Nick is being honored. When his mother mentions that Nick's father has been laid to rest during a speech, Nick gets up and leaves the table. He enters the house, sits on a stool, and points a pistol at his face just before firing. He then goes to cut a cake with his face on it. It was all a dream when he awoke. He and his mother are currently eating breakfast together, which is an amusing breakfast for a grown man. Yes, his mother has considered a London writer's course that he wants to take, but it doesn't appear that she supports it, so he turns his breakfast smile into a frown. How cute. Additionally, he is currently riding his bicycle to school. He talks to us about business. After giving the homework to the other guy, his girlfriend sneaks up on him and he did the homework for him. Inquiring as to whether he could be coming for involved with tomorrow night, however he says he can't cause he'll be occupied. After that, two men and a woman attempt to extort money from this man. He appears to owe them money. The head of the pack, Annie, compromises him with a blade. Yet, she doesn't actually do anything aside without any preparation him on the finger. Now we are in Nick's class, and a man is reading to the class his homework. The T-Tross scratch to top that he goes to the front of the glass, reads his own work while seated at the table. Although it is excellent poetry, his classmates appear completely disinterested. As a result, they all pack their belongings and head out when the bell rings. The cafeteria is now full of students. The person who crashed Nick's best friend, is telling Pete that he needs to stand up for himself and shouldn't be pushed around pizzas by other people. You cannot. As a result, out of respect for his friend, Nichols goes to pay off his pizza debt and whispers to Annie. Dude really believed he would be able to get away with that, and you are so broken. However, Annie only gave it a few seconds before attacking him and punching him in the face. Two of them are currently having a little heart-to-heart while waiting to see the principal. She tells him that because he sells essays, he is not superior to her. He turns to Nick and tells him to stop wasting his time on lost souls like Annie Newton after he admits that he is a hypocrite when the principal comes to Sandy's house. She has no prospects. He asserts, "Don't let us down." What's more, Scratch's just answer is, "Might I at any point leave now?" Then we see Annie back home. Her stepmother has not prepared dinner for her brother, so she stands up to her about it. This leads to an argument between her father and stepmother, but Annie just goes upstairs to make her brother Victor a sandwich. Victor asked her if she would be going out at night, and she said she would. Yes, Nick's house can be seen changing under the boy's moon. Nick responds that he won't even be around by tomorrow when Pete asks him about the same party and Pete teases him about being beaten by a girl. As part of the writer's program, he will be in London. He claims that his mother is constantly attempting to micromanage him and keep track of everything, but he won't let her have this one. She doesn't even know, but he is going anyway. Now, we see Annie and her boyfriend Marcus get into a car and drive off to rob a jewelry store. He smashes the glass, steals some jewelry, and then runs back to the Mercedes, which Mark just stalls, and he drives off the next morning, getting ready for school and taking the bag with him. Mark has requested that she leave the pack with him, however she declines and says he'll not do anything regarding it, yet he really follows through with something. He picks up his phone and dials the police number. What a rat at school. Oh. We don't see anyone putting the bag in her locker. She sees Pete giving her a stare down a few minutes later as she closes her locker. The police arrive, open the bag once more, locate the jeweler inside, and remove her. She calls Marcus from the station and hands him the empty. He inquired as to whether she knew how he found out, and she replied that she did and that she would handle it. She leaves the station, ready to exact vengeance on the person, after the call. Reddit her to the police because she is so certain. Presently we see Pete bidding farewell to Nick the Embrace and Nichols' home where his mother has looked into his past to London. It appears that the airline called to inform him that his flight time has been changed. He apologizes and says he was trying to talk to her about it when she confronts him about it. However, she told him that he had the ticket for a week and was going to go regardless of what she said. But she shot him because she thought he was just going to leave without saying a word. She claims that she feels like she has lived with a stranger. Nick is currently getting ready to leave in his room. After taking a watch and putting it in his pocket, Pete starts walking quickly, and boom. He is punched out of nowhere by a man who comes in. These are Annie's men. He's taken to Annie by them. She believes he is an outredditor. Therefore, in an effort to persuade him to admit to something he did not do, she is beating him. He says the hotel or the person who did it, the boy you're about to implicate, because the torture is too much for him to bear. Now, his best friend Nick is the answer. However, you must first comprehend his reasoning. He's not even close to being a snake. He simply anticipated that Nick would have left the country by this point and that Annie would not have anyone to stomp on. Nick's flight was delayed, which was unfortunate for everyone. As a result, while they are hanging out, he is at the party asking his girl if she wants to go to London. He tosses her their ticket and advises her to live it up. Apparently his mother's little discourse altered his perspective and he no longer needs to go, and you realize that isn't uplifting news for anyone. He's strolling back home when a vehicle begins pursuing him and afterward pushes him to a trench. Annie and her boys are there. He is currently being beaten up. Pete tries to justify his actions after getting out of the car, but no one is paying attention. Instead, he picks Nick up and asks who's broken now, to which Nick still responds, "You or we all love a guy with some balls. Don't we?" Okay. In any case, that may have been incorrect. Nick's watch falls while they dump Nick's body in a hole as they throw a few more punches and a hard kick to the face, which kills him. Before, I was able to forgive Pete, but now, how could you allow yourself to be a part of that? Friend for growing up in public anyway, and he goes home and tells Marcus about it. She tells him that she clapped the person who sold her out, and Marcus looks shocked because he is certain that person was not the one who sold her out. He's currently asking her for what good reason she came to him. "You realize I'm released early. For what reason do you come here?" he asked, and sends her away. She feels like she has been lied to. Wait until you discover that he was the one who duped you. In his workshop, she shatters a few things. She leaves after giving him an ironic kiss, and then we see her burning her clothes the next morning. What we see next will shock you. Nick emerges unscathed from the woods, so clean and fresh that he walks to school, sits in class, and appears unscathed. The problem is that no one can see him. He is, I don't know, invisible. Relatable. So even though you are sitting right there and can hear everything they are saying, no one will be able to tell he is in class. They utilize that valuable chance to move a couple of things out into the open about him, even his young lady. She calls him vainglorious and says he's continuously attempting to cause himself to feel significant. Man, you can't trust these girls, but his best friend also lied to him, so really, don't trust anyone, bro. He initially believes that they are just playing with him, but then he takes it and throws it at a shelf book, never leaving the table. He then goes to the phone, the key's office, to consider his mother is squarely in his chief's face. But the principal is unable to observe him. John Cena must be this man, because he shouts at his mother. She is unable to hear him, but he can hear her talking to the detectives about him. He is now sprinting home when he runs into someone in the school hallway. Gets hit by a vehicle run over by truck, yet nothing truly occurs, all things considered. When he returns home, he observes detectives frantically searching the house for him. By telling his mother he is dead, he tries to alleviate her suffering. She can't hear him now, of course. He's simply meandering the roads, and in the event that I figured out I was undetectable, I would do much something other than strolling the roads at any rate. Brian and Kate, the detectives, are making progress in their investigation. They talked to the principal, who informed them that Nick got into a fight with Annie. As a result, they had to go to Annie's house. It's possible that Brian knew Annie when she was young because her father was a police officer. The rope on the roof asked Annie what she was doing last night, and Nick was there to supervise her lies. However, he also learns that she applauded him because she believed he had ratted her out. He tries to save her by throwing her off the roof, but that just doesn't work. A search party is sent out by the detectives to the woods where Annie and Nick's body were dumped. Paints him and tells him to come. Nick is clearly ill when he hears that. He is now in his room and can see his mother entering and going through his belongings. He is reading along with her as she reads a poem he wrote. He holds his pet bird in his hands, and after a few seconds, it vanishes into an invisible paradise. That is a new insight for him. He says, "I'm alive," and he immediately runs to the location where his body was dumped. He's attempting to get the hunt party to track down them, however he's not having a lot of karma with the people. Despite the fact that Peter is reporting the situation to Annie and the other members of the group, he is concerned that they will soon find out because the dog initially gave the impression of being able to see Nick but then turned away. The dog helped find Nick's watch. Therefore, he informs him that if he goes to report the incident to the police, he will also face jail time. In the interim, Scratch is there paying attention to everything, and he presently slips once more into her home and she's attempting to get together her stuff and taken off. Victor wakes up and inquires if she will leave and never return. "That breaks my heart, just like your mother." Even though Annie is cold now, she is gentle with this boy and tells Victor to never follow in her excellent advice. She responds, "Cool," when her father enters the room and tells her to leave. However, she would return and clap for her younger brother in the event of an incident. She departs. Scratch does one of his discourses, once more. The search in the woods gets more intense after I tell her that her terrible family dynamic does not excuse anything she has done. Now that we can see ambulances and choppers, we can also see professional-sized naked bodies out there. He has 2-3 day tops. Now we see the next body and can make out his twitching fingers. He's truly alive. Now, Detective Brian goes to talk to Marcus. He asked him if he was with Annie on Tuesday night, and naturally, he said yes. He then asked him if he was with her when she robbed the jewelry store the night before, and he said no. He has no knowledge of that. Brian doesn't overstate the fact that he knows Marcus has been out on parole for 8 months. He simply hands over his card and tells Marcus to call him if he sees Annie because he wants to talk to her about a student who has gone missing from her school. Last but not least, Brian should make sure to inform Marcus that he is aware of the specific model of Carla that was taken the same night the jewelry store was robbed. Nick is now explaining to his mother that he is confident that this will not affect her in any way because she always has everything under control. He is throwing everything on her table, yelling at her, and shaking her. Even if he threw a chair through the window, he didn't actually do any of that until a few seconds later. His mother gives up and Pete is taking a walk in the rain when Marcus suddenly appears out of nowhere, grabs him, and fires a gun at his chest. She is crying so hard and calling Pete's name. Marcus tells Pete that the police are following him, and he is. He takes Pete into the woods, where the body was dumped the next day, and Pete points to him. Marcus tries to get Annie to go to a location so he can clap her, but she thinks something is wrong, so she calls Pete and tells him to go. Instead, Pete goes, and Detective Kate follows him. Nick tried his best to get her to wake up, but Peter is now on the bridge with the 2 guys, and Annie is watching from a distance. Marcus, on the other hand, appears from behind her and fires a gun at her back. He tells Pete to go home and takes her to the bridge, where the other guys are. He dashes home. He clearly expressed his gratitude at being asked to leave. Marcus is right that they need to move quickly because Pete has a tail, but it's too late because the police are already here. Anything grabs a shotgun for Marcus and is aiming it at the police, but the cops are now surrounded, and Annie is the only one who managed to escape. She manages to escape Nick Creams while climbing out as a scapegoat, making Peter Parker extremely proud. "They'll get you, Annie," due to the fact that she turns around and screams. "She heard me, Nichols." She decides to stay back and do a little dancing after selling a ring that belonged to Marcus to a guy at a club and getting paid. She takes off her hoodie and beanie and is now doing the Sooner from White Woman dance while Nick is just watching. The next day, she goes to her mother's grave and says she's sorry. Nick then starts talking about how he sometimes wishes his mom died rather than his dad because of the pressure she puts on him. He now touches Annie's shoulder with his hand. He tells her to just tell the more his body is what. She just stands up and leaves because he says he knows she can hear him. He goes after her. She steals money from the school at night and places it in her locker in an envelope marked, "Victory." Nick is there to tell her that he is dying, that he doesn't have much time left, and that she is the only person who can save him, which is ironic. She clearly hears his voice in her head, as you can tell. As a result, when he yells her name, she turns around but cannot see anyone. She is depressed. Nick, being a good boy, doesn't look as she heads to the bathroom now. Nick, who is in the hole and has opened his eyes at this point, is sleeping on the basketball court and is right next to her, calling and running his hands through her body. He oversleeps, and the basketball team that comes in for practice wakes him up. How come you're oversleeping or even sleeping at all? You look like a ghost. Regardless, we now see Annie Nick's house. She's becoming through his old photographs and getting nostalgic. Don't let me know these two are experiencing passionate feelings for in light of the fact that even Scratch is over here grinning while his body is rotting in that opening. Fortunately, Nick's mother intervenes to put an end to any brewing romance, and he flees the house and immediately into the woods, where they dispose of Nick's body in Viola. There is no body. Nick is telling Annie that someone was there to move his body, and he is asking her to believe that the substances she found with Pete days ago prove Pete was present. So she pursues Pete at school. Pete is now reminding her that Nick never actually wrote her out. After he reveals that he and Marcus moved the body, she pursues Marcus and ambushes him in his car just outside of a police station. She then takes him to a precipice and orders him to kneel, causing a role reversal moment, before pointing a gun at him. Nick begs Pete to refrain from self-deleting in the meantime. However, Pete has no hearing at all. But the wonderful thing is that while Peter is in the transition zone, where he is not yet dead but still alive, he sees Nick and can communicate with him. Nick is now asking Pete where he moved the body, and Annie is asking Mark the same thing. After Pete's parents answer, Annie leaves Marcus and turns around to go find his neck, while Pete's parents rush into his room and find him in the state's end. However, it turns out that not clapping him was not a very good idea because Marcus stands up and shoots her, despite the fact that she has enough stamina to shoot him and stand up to call Detective Bryant. As a result, she does not die. She tells him where Nick is and that she has a special present for her brother in her locker and wants him to make sure Victor gets it. The police rush to the dam, where Nick's body is, immediately. However, Nick arrives naturally ahead of them. He now touches himself after discovering his body. No, not in that manner. He is now in his body, but Nick is drowning because the gates open and he cannot save himself. Kate informs her that the gates are now closed and that the police are searching for the neck. When Brian discovers him, everyone rushes there. He is indeed alive. They rush him into the ambulance, with Annie's watching from afar. She continues to bleed. She gets into her vehicle and kind of dark sound for quite a while. A police officer wakes her up later that evening and asks her to get out of the car. They start chasing her at the hospital, but she doesn't and drives away as expected. The doctors are watching Nick's mother. Annie is finally surrounded by the police, and all of them have guns pointed at her. However, she hears Nick's voice in her head saying, "I need you, Annie," which was all the fuel she needed. She steps on the gas pedal and drives through the police bar. She puts this in place, gets out of her car, and walks the rest of the way. Naturally, Nick directs her to the hospital, where his body is being operated on. She makes it. Mom leaves Nick. Nick tries to make peace when he sees her, but you know Mama can't hear you. You have some nerve. So Annie needs to do everything all alone. She says that all she needs to do is talk to Nick, but Nick's mother slaps her in the face. And then tells her that Nick is here, that she can feel and hear him, and that she knows what he wants. She obviously doesn't believe him. As a result of Nick's directive, he tells Annie's mother about the time she was in his room reading his poems and how he was with her. Annie says she just needs to see if she can help him, but Nick's mother says no, hands her gun, and he says she knows she can bring him back. He is now running her fingers through the next body as she finally allows her in. She removes her necklace, apologizes to him, and begs him not to leave, which was once her mother's, puts it in his hand while she joins him on the bed and cuddles up with him. When she does that, the invisible Nick disappears, and the real Nick wakes up and tells Annie that she did one good thing. Annie taps out after she saves it. After that, Victor is seen playing with a toy plan, and Nick shows up and talks to him. Victor claims that his sister passed away, and Nick suggests that they send her a message. Victor's message is brief and straightforward. "Hello, Annie." Scratch composes that on the plane for himself and they fly it. Moral the story: I don't have any idea, however that was miserable. Subscribe for more videos like this one, and like the channel to support it. Much thanks to you for watching.